know how to go about it as a proactive manner instead of a reactive manner.
It is.
And so beyond peeling back the layer and understanding how your ego protects your limiting beliefs, are there any further steps to this process?
Implement what you learn. And there's no one way to implement what you learn, because who's to say what you're going to learn?
Could you give an example though?
Absolutely. If you learn that you're a liar, how do you stop lying? You can say, I'm just going to tell the truth, until you find yourself in a situation where you would normally lie. And now you have to deal with the identity crisis attached to lying. Right? Because you can peel back the layers and notice, okay, I got to this situation in my life because I've been lying for a very long time. Why have I been lying? Because I feel guilty, because I'm ashamed of something. Okay, let's work through that. That's a process though. Working through guilt and shame can take a year. But you see somebody tomorrow that you would normally lie to. They ask you about this thing that you lied about. And now you have the opportunity to tell them that you were lying. Are you going to do it? What happens in that moment is not only the fact that you want to change your life and you know that if you stop lying, you can take your life into a different direction. Yeah, you thought about the destination that you wanted to start walking toward, but you didn't really think about having to face yourself in that situation. You didn't think about the fact that you identify as someone who lies, or you identify as someone that encourages you to lie, meaning you identify as someone in a way that encourages you. So I identify as a baller, but I'm not balling. I rent cars. But when people ask me, is that my car? I say yes. I tell people I drive a Benz, insinuating that it's mine. They see me driving a Benz. They're like, oh, I guess he does drive a Benz, but it's rented. It's not my car. So now when someone comes to you and they says, is that Benz rented? Or they say something like, can you help me buy my first Benz? I finally got the money. I'm ready to buy my dream car. You drive my dream car. Can you help me buy my dream car? Can you take me to the dealership that you got your Benz from? Do they have more Benzes like yours? This is an opportunity for you to tell that person, I didn't buy this car. If I take you to where I got my Benz from, that means you'll be renting a Benz, but you want to buy a Benz. But you now know that if you tell them that you rented the Benz, they're going to look at you differently. They're going to look at you as, they're going to look at you probably not as the person that you want to be identified as. You want to be identified as a baller. You're not a baller. So now you're having an identity crisis. You're not a baller, you're a liar. But you also been telling yourself that you're a baller. That's why you bought the Benz. Rented the Benz, and then lied about it. So that's an example of someone who says that they want to do something, embarks on a journey of self-discovery, peels back a few layers, runs into the first wall, thinks they understand the issue, thinks they understand exactly what that wall stands for, but they don't. They don't understand the layer of that wall and what the layers of understanding that's required in order to understand how to shift. It's not just that that you're a liar, because you're probably not a liar. You've lied repeatedly, but that's probably not a characteristic of yours. You adopted that because you were shameful. You were guilty. But now you have this identity that you built socially, but you have an internal conflict because that's not really who you are. It's who you wanted to be. It's even who you told yourself you were for some time, but it's not true, and you realize that now. You got so caught up in it, though, that you started to believe the lie, too. You forgot the car was rented. You got so used to paying for it, you paid for it like it was a lease, but it was rented.
What does that process look like? Self-discovery. What are the stages?
The stages of self-discovery. Perhaps the first step is acknowledging a need to self-reflect and the importance of self-reflection itself. So perhaps the first one is understanding the importance of self-reflection. But that typically comes from feeling like something's wrong, right? So understanding that there's something to address and beginning to peel back the layers of whatever that thing is that you believe you need to address, and not stopping until you get to the core of the issue. So no longer like accepting surface level, superficial reasoning for whatever the circumstance is. Keep digging. It's a very dark experience, and it can be a very long experience. And for that reason, it can be very discouraging for some. For some, it's very encouraging because they can see the growth as they're going. For every layer that they peel back, they understand they're getting closer to achieving understanding of self. So they're not discouraged by the number of layers that they have to pull back. They're encouraged by succeeding at pulling that layer back and the process that comes along with that. until they get to the next layer. And each level builds up a better understanding of self, but it also builds excitement. However, it does require patience and complete submission to the process, because you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know how you're going to respond to what you find.
So acknowledging that something needs to change, not as conservative, not settling for surface level answers.
No, that's not a step. That's just an understanding and acknowledging something needs to change.
So what's the second step?
Peeling back the layers. You can't, and you also, you can't prepare yourself for it typically. So acknowledging that something needs to change and beginning to pull back the layers from in whatever situation you think needs to change, or whatever aspect of self you believe needs to change.
What does that mean, pulling back the layers? What does that entail?
That means a situation happens in your life and you say, this situation is never going to happen in my life again. Never. Right? But because this situation happened in my life and I never want it to happen again, now I'm pulling back the layers to see what did I do to contribute to the situation and how can I make sure it never happens again, right? But if it's only about that situation, then you're only going to pull back a certain amount of layers. What typically happens, or what could happen in that situation, is as you pull back the layers, when you begin to understand why this situation happened, you also begin to understand why other situations happened. And as you begin to understand why other situations happen, you become more inspired to keep peeling back layers, not stopping once you say, okay, I figured out what happened here. Let's no longer self-reflect and let's just start living again, minus self-reflection. At the end of the day, it's something that people are interested in doing when they believe that they want to do something about their lives. But you have to have the stamina to actually get through it, and then the courage to actually do something about the information you gather. Because some people think they want to change, but they don't really want to change. And they notice that when they get closer to the opportunity to change, or they really want to change, but they're afraid of change. And they didn't think that they were afraid of change until they got closer to the opportunity to create real change in their lives. Whenever the thing happened, they were really passionate about it. They really wanted to shift. Really, they really wanted to see something different. And the chances of seeing something differently right away are very slim. So to look in the mirror and say, I'm tired of the way that my body looks. I want to work out. Okay. Or I want to lose weight. Right? Or I want to have a lean, tight body. You may feel super passionate about that for a day or an hour. If you said that at 9 a.m. in the morning or 7:30 a.m. in the morning, while you were getting ready for work, you caught yourself coming out of the shower in the mirror. You was like, I don't really like what I see. I'm tired of running from this mirror every morning because I don't like what I see. That was 7:30 in the morning. How do you feel at night at 6:30 before dinner? Are you going to curb the amount of food that you eat because of that realization or confrontation that you had with yourself in the bathroom this morning? Or now that you have the actual opportunity to do something about it, you realize you either don't have the discipline to do it or you're afraid to do it.
What are people afraid of?
Change. Just different. Just to be indifferent. Even if it's better. There's some people who are afraid of better because they don't know how to handle better. They're afraid of gaining improvement before they improve. And once they improve and they realize it's amazing and actually have what it takes, there are also moments where they're afraid of losing it, even though they've already proven to themselves that they have what it takes. But are you going to do what it takes? Are you going to use what it takes? You can have it. That doesn't mean you're going to do anything with it. So if you find that it's important to self-reflect and you find that you pull back a layer or two and it's getting scarier. It's getting scarier because you're confronting yourself a bit more with each layer you pull back. And chances are you're going to get closer to this thing that you've been trying to avoid thinking about. And it can be a plethora of experiences. When you said that you wanted to change your life, you were very passionate about it, but you didn't know what that was going to entail. Now that you're self-reflecting, you're beginning to remember some of the things that happened in your life that could have potentially led to you shifting your thought process and taking your life into a different direction. And you're afraid to confront that experience. You're afraid to confront that part of yourself. You probably were not thinking about that part of yourself when you decided you wanted to shift. So the idea of shifting can be nice, but the actual execution of it can keep you from actually doing it. So that's where the concept of surrendering to the process, of peeling back each layer, comes in. Otherwise, you can stifle yourself. And self-reflection is really where you see how strong your ego is. That's really when your ego gets an invitation from you to show up. But if you're serious, you can see how the things that you do, the things that you allow your ego to do to protect you, and the things that you do to protect your ego, because a person's ego is their protector. And if something is protecting you, perhaps you want to keep it. You want to celebrate it so that it continues to protect you. So even though some people may be aware that their ego is out of control, there is some benefit that they get from it. So to some extent, they're protecting their ego just as much as their ego is protecting them. And in protecting your ego, you start defending limiting beliefs. And the more you defend limiting beliefs, the less likely you are to peel back a layer so that you can get to know yourself better throughout the self-reflection process. And for that reason, it takes time, because you have to break down those limiting beliefs and why you choose to defend them. You almost have to negotiate with your ego, not only so that your ego can back off, but also so that it makes sense to you. You gotta have to wrestle with these ideas a bit, because once there's some pain, your ego jumps in. And it's your responsibility to tell your ego to stand down. And sometimes your ego is not. You don't know how to tell your ego to stand down. You know how to tell yourself to stand down, but not your ego. That's why you have some therapists that don't accept certain patients or potential patients. Like they have a pre-screening process and you can fail it and they won't take you on as a client. They'll say you're not ready for therapy in whatever capacity you were seeking it from them, because not everybody's ready to wrestle with those ideas. Not everybody's ready to wrestle with their ego, and so they haven't. And because they haven't reached a level where they're really ready to make a breakthrough. They've only made these steps that are comfortable. You can make steps and not make a breakthrough. A breakthrough comes from discomfort, and thus typically for someone that has submitted to the process of self-reflection, unless life is forcing you to change. That's another way to establish a break.
Right. But I think it's also nice to know how to go about it as a proactive manner instead of a reactive manner.
It is.
And so beyond peeling back the layer and understanding how your ego protects your limiting beliefs, are there any further steps to this process?
Implement what you learn. And there's no one way to implement what you learn, because who's to say what you're going to learn? Could you give an example though? Absolutely. If you learn that you're a liar, how do you stop lying? You can say, I'm just going to tell the truth, until you find yourself in a situation where you would normally lie. And now you have to deal with the identity crisis attached to lying. Right? Because you can peel back the layers and notice, okay, I got to this situation in my life because I've been lying for a very long time. Why have I been lying? Because I feel guilty or because I'm ashamed of something. Okay, let's work through that. That's a process though. Working through guilt and shame can take a year. But you see somebody tomorrow that you would normally lie to. They ask you about this thing that you lied about. And now you have the opportunity to tell them that you were lying. Are you going to do it? What happens in that moment is not only the fact that you want to change your life and you know that if you stop lying, you can take your life into a different direction. Yeah, you thought about the destination that you wanted to start walking toward, but you didn't really think about having to face yourself in that situation. You didn't think about the fact that you identify as someone who lies, or you identify as someone that encourages you to lie, meaning you identify as someone in a way that encourages you to lie. I identify as a baller, but I'm not balling. I rent cars. But when people ask me, is that my car? I say yes. I tell people I drive a Benz, insinuating that it's mine. They see me driving a Benz. They're like, oh, I guess he does drive a Benz, but it's rented. It's not my car. So now when someone comes to you and they says, is that Benz rented? Or they say something like, can you help me buy my first Benz? I finally got the money. I'm ready to buy my dream car. You drive my dream car. Can you help me buy my dream car? Can you take me to the dealership that you got your Benz from? Do they have more Benzes like yours? This is an opportunity for you to tell that person, I didn't buy this car. If I take you to where I got my Benz from, that means you'll be renting a Benz, but you want to buy a Benz. But you now know that if you tell them that you rented the Benz, they're going to look at you differently. They're going to look at you as, well, they're going to look at you probably not as the person that you want to be identified as. You want to be identified as a baller. You're not a baller. So now you're having an identity crisis. You're not a baller, you're a liar. But you also been telling yourself that you're a baller. That's why you bought the Benz. Well, rented the Benz and then lied about it. So that's an example of someone who says that they want to do something, embarks on a journey of self-discovery, peels back a few layers, runs into the first wall, thinks they understand the issue, thinks they understand exactly what that wall stands for, but they don't. They don't understand the layer of that wall and what the layers of understanding that's required in order to understand how to shift is not just that that you're a liar, because you're probably not a liar. You've lied repeatedly, but that's probably not a characteristic of yours. You adopted that because you were shameful. You were guilty. But now you have this identity that you've built socially, but you have an internal conflict because that's not really who you are. It's who you wanted to be. It's even who you told yourself you were for some time, but it's not true, and you realize that now. You got so caught up in it, though, that you started to believe the lie too. You forgot the car was rented. You got so used to paying for it, you paid for it like it was a lease, but it was rented. And now you're having an identity crisis. Not only do you have to not lie to that person if you want to change things, you actually have to face who you really are, which is what you didn't do from the beginning. So you created a compound effect onto that issue that you already had, right? There was something about you that you didn't like from the beginning. And instead of addressing that, you started lying. So now there's a compounded effect on you not dealing with that. Because chances are, you not building a better relationship with yourself is the reason why you're probably about to lose that relationship with that person eventually. Because if you tell them right now that you've been lying, chances are they're not going to want to deal with you. And if they find out that you were lying on their own, there's an even higher probability that they don't want to deal with you. And there's probably a few people in your life that would do that, that would probably stop dealing with you if they find out that you've been lying about a lot of things. So now you have this identity crisis that you have to work on. You had to stop lying, which is a bad habit that you have to work on. And now you also have to cope with losing the community that you so desperately wanted to associate yourself with. So much so that you were lying about who you are so that you can be accepted into that community.
So a big part of it is also how you see yourself, what you identify as.
What do you mean?
You said part of it is you tell yourself a lie until you believe it. Like you start to identify as something that really you're not. So you got to also make a shift in who you believe you are.
Yes.
But isn't that sometimes a bit counterintuitive as the notion of, let's say you want to lose weight, you got to start identify as someone who's like an athlete, for instance, in order to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be a bowler, you got to identify as one.
Then you have to do the things that bowlers do. Bowlers put themselves in positions to bowl. They don't lie about it. Athletes go put the work in. They don't lie about it. How could you lie about being an athlete? If you want to lose weight, you can just take a picture of yourself right now and Photoshop it to make yourself look like something that you actually don't look like. Whereas an athlete would focus on training, sculpting their body in a real way, as opposed to using deceitful tactics in the picture. If you identify as something, it shows. If you desire to identify as something, but you don't really identify as that, that also shows too.
And how do you make that breach? Probably be something. So actually, desiring to identify as something and actually identifying as something. Or someone.
You do the things that the people or the person that you identify as would do, not the things that a person who desires that would do. Like if you want to, you hear this all the time when people say, start acting like the person you want to be. Right? Start acting like that person, not acting like a person who desires to be that person. Start acting like that person. It's the same concept. There's a difference between someone who's really that and a wannabe. If you're acting like someone who's really that, then one day you'll probably be that. But if you spend all of your time being a wannabe, then the chances of you actually becoming that are slim to none, because you don't identify as that. You identify as a wannabe that.
So the difference is action.
The difference is perspective. Do you have the perspective of a boss, or do you have the perspective of someone who wants to be a boss? The employee wants to be a boss. They spend their whole time trying to memorize what bosses say, man, trying to dress like the boss, trying to do the thing like the boss, but they never quite become the boss because they don't shift who they are. Are you a boss, or are you somebody that wants to be a boss?
And what would an employer look like that is a boss?
That depends on the boss. It's not one type of person that's a boss.
What's the perspective though?
It depends on the boss. You have some people that are they're founder of an organization, but they don't run the organization. They hire a CEO. So someone else runs the organization, but they don't own it. You have some people that would tell you that they don't own an organization, they just control it, right? Doesn't actually mean that they don't really own it. It just means that they've wrapped the organization into multiple layers of a trust. So it's the trust that owns it, and they actually own the trust, right? So, but every boss doesn't do that. Are you a leader? Are you someone who thinks about helping other people before you help yourself? How do you think about that? Do you really think about helping other people, or you think about helping yourself and you help other people as a tactic to help yourself? in the long term. In other words, I'm going to give you something that I know that you need, so I know that you owe me a favor in the future. Or I'm going to give you everything that I know that you need so that you like me enough to want to come and work for me. That's me helping myself in the future. It's not really about you. Or am I going to give unconditionally? And because people understand that I give unconditionally, they're interested in working with me. And I continue to do that. I can sustain that because that's who I really am. Right? And it's not just giving materialistic things. It's making sure that I protect, I nurture, I expand, I develop, not only myself, but the people around me. But I do it myself first, because that's what it means to lead, or at least point other people in the right direction. You can lead from the back and still do it yourself first. Do I ask things of others that I do myself, that I do first, that I do more of, and that I'm willing to take the hit for if it goes south. If this goes the wrong way, I'm willing to take the hit for it. In other words, if it goes wrong, am I looking to blame somebody else? Am I looking to talk about what they didn't do? Doesn't mean I'm not interested in holding them accountable. But if you're the leader, ultimately it's your fault. The CEO of an organization, it doesn't matter that the director of marketing is not doing their job. Eventually, it comes down to the CEO. You're the leader. But are you really? Or are you posing? There's people who get to that level, and by posing, they don't stay at that level for very long. But you can get to that level by posing. And there are people who are not posing, but they don't come across as your typical CEO. And it also depends on where you're from. What is a typical CEO to you? If you come from the world of construction, you probably look at CEOs very different than if you come from the world of tech. It's a very different way of working. So there are some of the same characteristics, but how are they expressed differently? It's a different person, it's a different culture, different industry. Yes, there are certain traits of a leader. Yes, a boss is more than just a leader. Sometimes a boss is a psychologist. Sometimes a boss is not. A boss is just a brother, a sister, sometimes a little sister, sometimes a one being led. Today, things are changing so quickly. Even as the boss, you have to be able to admit when you made a mistake and when somebody else actually has the right answer. Some people think because they're bosses, they always have to know the way. Because they're leaders, they always have to know the way. Leadership today is a shared experience, and chances are the person who's willing to share it the most is actually the one who has the most, or the most qualification to lead, because it's not an ego trip for them. Again, it comes back to giving. They're willing to give more, even leadership responsibility. So there is no one type of leader. And here we can say they have these traits, so that's great, but they're exposed very different. Yeah, they're exposed very differently based on the leader. So differently that sometimes you don't see it. Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are said to be two very different types of leaders, two very different types of people, even though there's some similarities and qualities that they have, characteristics that they have. So yeah, there are characteristics that they share, but how they're expressed can be very different based on the person.
At the beginning, they said one thing that separated MJ from everybody else was his presence and being present, like almost like a Buddhist. Like that was his most distinctive, really, quality. How important is presence in your journey for peak performance?
How important is presence and a journey for peak performance? Without presence, you're probably not going to be able to perform at your peak, because presence is what allows you to take the lesson from the moment in the moment. Meaning if you're not present, then your lesson requires retrospect, and you can still miss it because you missed the moment. Whereas if you're very present in a moment, you're focused on what's happening in that moment. So it becomes easier for you to squeeze everything that you possibly can out of that moment, even if you don't do anything with it in that moment. You can capture it for a later moment. But there's times where people go places and they don't remember being in that place because they weren't present in the moment. You would say to your friend, "Oh, you remember we was over here and you met this person," and that person at all. And it was just 2 days ago. And they're not a person that suffers from loss of memory, short-term or long-term. But perhaps they were not present in that moment, and that's why they don't remember. But if you're present in the moment, you can squeeze everything that you possibly can out of the moment. Where focus goes, energy flows, right? So if you're focused on this moment, your energy is going to flow to this moment. And because of that, it's easier to attach an emotion to this moment and thus get the most that you possibly can out of that moment. That's the only way a person performs at their peak. Jordan was somebody that performed at his peak because he was present in the moment. Otherwise, you're rather nonchalant. You're indifferent to the moment. So the chances of you being able to perform at your peak is very slim because you're not present. You're not in the moment. Your head is somewhere else. So if your head and your heart is somewhere else, then what are the chances of you performing well here? You're not focused on what's happening here. So presence is very important for peak performance. There's really a very slim margin that one will be able to perform at their peak without presence.
How do you reach a high level of presence, or just any level of presence? Is that through meditation? Is that through things like a body scan? Is that just to keep reminding yourself to be present?
For some people, they have to keep reminding themselves. I know people that have an alarm on their phone every 10 minutes just to remind themselves to stay on task every 10 minutes all day long. So let's say that person gets 8 hours of sleep, 16 hours every 10 minutes, an alarm goes up on the phone to remind them to stay present. There are people who pray a lot throughout the day. That helps them to stay present. There are people who meditate. They meditate 2-3 times a day, 10 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time. Helps them to stay present. There's some people who have affirmations everywhere, just post-its everywhere in places that they can't ignore, and they change them often. Because after a while, if you have a house where you have post-its everywhere, then after a while it just becomes normal. You don't even see them. So they change them often. They change the colors. They put them in different places to remind them to stay present. Being present is very important. There's different ways in which you can go about remaining present. Meditation is not the only way. There are other ways. It really depends on what works for you. Whatever it is that works for you, I would suggest people find it, because presence is what allows us to squeeze the juice out of being in the moment. Whatever you decide to do to actually be in that moment, doing which makes sense that you even decide to do it. Some things people feel like they have to do, and they're understand. So their physical bodies may be necessary to be there, but they don't think that their minds and their hearts are. And I would say give it a shot. Give yourself a shot at being present and see if it's fruitful in your life. Chances are it will be, because there's something that we can take from every moment, especially if we're aligned, meaning we align our subconscious with our conscious mind. Then see, hear a lot of things that push you toward your dream or your goal, because your mind is primed to search for those things, and it's easier to see them when you're present.
When a lot of plays get really good, they start to envision themselves, like what happens if I miss this shot, or like they start to go in like a certain pathway. Why do you think that is?
When a person is believed to be good, and because of that, they second guess everything that they're doing, hoping that it's good. That happens because in some instances, they feel like they have to live up to something in order to be perceived as such. Like they may not see themselves as that just yet, but they're performing at a really high level. And so they can only prove it to themselves that they are that if they keep performing at that high level. But they don't trust that they are that because they know that they aren't it. They're still trying to prove it to themselves. And until they do that, they're not that. When you know it, it's a different thing. You trust yourself. Curry, he's not shooting the ball as if he's overthinking the shot. Floyd Mayweather is not going into the ring questioning if he can fight. He knows he's Floyd Mayweather, and he enters the ring like that. You can say the same thing for others, other prominent figures in society. Even those who have taken a loss. Floyd Mayweather may not be a good example for some people because he's never taken a loss in the ring. But there are people who have taken losses, and it hasn't changed, at least from what we can see, how they see themselves. At least not to the extent where they no longer feel like they're winners. So when you really know that, you put the time in, you put the work in, and you are what you think you are, then it's different.
That is so interesting, because maybe I'm again getting into the nitty gritty, but like what makes the difference in between having to proving yourself that you're that, or knowing that you're that? Is that the hours of practice, or is that the results of like championship rings and like being undefeated?
Allen Iverson doesn't have any championship rings. He's still Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson was actually voucher for not coming to practice. Still Allen Iverson. In other words, did you become this by, like, if you're engaging in something, you know if it's natural to you or not. If it's not natural to you, you probably have to practice more often than the person that it is natural to. Although the person who it is natural to probably will practice more than you because it's natural to. You know when something's you and when it isn't. You know when you're performing well at something. That's one thing. You could perform well at something that you're not. You could be very skilled at something that you're not talented at. You're good at this because you practice this, but you don't really have a knack for this. Or you can have a talent. You have a knack for it. That's when it's you. You have a natural inclination to be good at this. Then comes the question, do you like it? You could be really talented at something that you don't like. Right? Some people are really good dancers, but they don't dance very often. They don't really care to. It's not really high on that list of enjoyment, but they're really good at it. And you know it's them. Something can also be you and you be bad at it. It's how does it feel to you? Does it connect with you in a real way? Because we have a lot of people that love to dance. They're not good dancers still, but they love it. So they do it, and they should do it. They're dancers, not good ones. They enjoy dancing. So you can say both. You can say this person has a lot of championship rings. They know that, Robert Ory has a lot of championship rings, but is he a better basketball player than Allen Iverson? Does his three-point shot that wins the game say he's more skilled than Allen Iverson? John Stockton? There's so many names. It doesn't. How do you know if something is you? You know if it's you based on the feeling that it gives you when you do it. Does it feel like home when you do it? Whether you're good at it or not. So it's layered. Is it you, meaning does it feel the best? Or is it you because you're talented at it? Now on top of that, what's the pressure that comes along? The external pressures. Is this a job? Is it a hobby that you're really good at? Or because you're really good at it, you hang your hat on it? Because you hang your hat on it, you feel you have to perform now? Because this is what gives you a sense of self-worth. And this example is basketball, but it can be anything. So there could be a lot of reasons why a person feels like that. Then you pay attention to that. You learn from it. You move on to the next thing and give all of your attention to it.
How do you eliminate the fear of injury or any other setbacks?
The way that a person who engages in activity that is prone to danger can overcome fear and still give their all to that activity is by focusing on love, the love that they have for the activity, as opposed to the fear that they have for all of the things that are associated with the activity. They can think about things that they love that are associated with the activity. And that's what inspires their passion. Because really, what's not dangerous? Leaving your house every day is dangerous. Riding a bike is dangerous. Driving a car is dangerous. We got used to it. It's dangerous. So many aspects of life are dangerous. So it's the love that you have for the thing that distracts you from the fear associated with engaging in the thing. And because you focus on the love, you attract more of those things that you love. So that's what most people do. Because again, leaving your house is very dangerous. You can think about the fact that you can leave your house today and never come home again. Or you can think about all the things that you would love to do today and focus on them. Most people focus on them. Listen, one is just concentrated and the other one is more general.
When pursuing your goals very diligently, goes very aggressively, you high chances of you rubbing people off the wrong way. But somehow it's still a business of relationships.
Yes.
How do you deal with that duality?
Politics, man. Politics is about playing the long game. Today you may have a bad day. You may have rubbed a lot of people wrong today. If you come back and you play the game tomorrow, you stay focused on the goal long term, because there will be a lot of days where people rub you the wrong way. But the objective is not to hold on to it and try your best to remember that everyone is just trying to fulfill their agenda. A lot of people in survival mode don't feel like there's enough for everyone, so they're trying to get as much as they possibly can. Some people it's just a game. You're just trying to win in their little way, whatever that may be. So yes, politics can be very enjoyable, but it can also be annoying to people. Not understand both sides. Part of being social is being annoyed, and I think innately we understand it. So we're a bit forgiving when it comes to that, because there's times when we annoy ourselves. So I was someone else.